she's in love with ChatGPT.
Your greatest sense of purpose is almost always found in your greatest place of pain.
Sex robot industry will be bigger than porn.
I should already know how to deal with this. Why am I dealing with this again?
What purpose allows you to do, it allows you to endure it.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules podcast. It's your girl Breezy, and I am here with the man, the myth, the legend who always mocks me during my introduction, Mr. Adrian Crawford. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing all right. I was up early this morning and
why don't you just share with the people what you were listening to at 4:30 this morning?
4:30 this morning, I was reading an article. First, I started reading an article that was in the Atlantic about resegregation, talking about some of the things with President Trump and the DEI stuff. And then I always have a list of podcasts I listen to. One of them is The Daily. And so I go look at it. I haven't looked in a couple of days. And I go into it, and the topic was like, she's in love with a she's in love with ChatGPT. And then it goes on like, no, like in love and like had sex on. I'm like, what in the world are we talking about? And so I'm like, you see that title, you're like, yeah, I got to figure out what's going on.
Naturally, I have to listen.
I have so many questions. And so, yeah, I was listening to that, and yeah, we're pretty cooked as a society. Once I saw that, we're cooked as a society. Once I saw that, I was like, I had some hope, but I'm like, oh my gosh, that was pretty dope.
Do you think that we'll experience the access to sex robots in your lifetime?
Oh, it's already here. People already have them.
But in turn, like, I couldn't go out and purchase one.
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe I could. I don't know where I would find that or how much that would cost. Maybe that's just because of my values. But can anybody access that right now?
Yeah, you can. I remember it was a couple years ago, Elon was on Joe Rogan, and he had talked about it. Like, and it kind of, the way he was alluding is that he has experienced that as well. So shout out to my man.
When you're saying this, all I can think about, you know that Rick's
toy box.
Yeah. Imagine it like it upgrades and it's like Rick's robots.
Rick's robots right there. You know what I'm saying?
It's not funny, but yeah. Okay. So today, do we just want to jump into the topic for like how do we segue from that? I don't know.
No, so I mean, I think in our lifetime, 100%. I mean, you're seeing it, and I think it'll be more access. I think what's going to happen is it's just going to upgrade more because you'll be able to have like AI embedded. So you'll eventually have this thing that looks like it's a robot, but it looks like a human and things like that. And it's going to know you, and it's going to have the ability to connect to all the things via the internet. It's going to learn you. And so in people's minds, it becomes in a very broken way, like the perfect companion. But see, I think that issue with that is you get better with like resistance in life, not somebody just agreeing with you or just trying to help you solve everything. And I think that's the part of relationship that has like gotten lost. And that's why I think people will go way more there. I think we've lost the ability to just have conversations, to be in relationship. Anytime there are difficult times in relationships, a lot of times people walk away. So you're thinking about that. Why wouldn't people go to a place or a situation, even though it sounds crazy? It's not that big of a jump to where our society has gone to, because it's funny, people in where we used to have very clear views of what we would call male, female, right? And that's changed into people's minds. So like to make a jump to people like, and again, I'm not meaning this in a disrespectful way, but to make a jump of somebody like, we think the craziest thing, I've seen a lot of crazy stuff, but we think the craziest thing right now is people like with robots. I'm like, dude, there's so many crazy things out there in the world. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like people with, you think about aliens and people talking about, there's so much crazy in the world today, because when you don't have a baseline of truth, what ends up happening when you don't have a baseline of truth is that things can go wherever you want it to go. There has to be something that's true. And if we all define what true is, that line just moves, because that's what I always worry about. Somebody in their mind thinks it's true for them to be a 30-year-old man and date a 12-year-old girl. They think that's okay. Well, we would all say, no, that's wrong. Well, who's to define that's not true for him? And that's what I'm saying. There has to be a baseline of truth. And I think that's the slippery slope we've been on for a while. And I think we're just seeing a bunch of stuff play out now.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic, a deeper conversation for another time maybe, but I've been so interested in the idea that let's even take something like sex robots, where traditionally that might have been sitting on the left politically, is probably going to start to move towards the right politically, which is such an interesting conversation to have.
It is, because I think what you're going to do what people keep talking about, because like we're always so slow, people are going to be talking about like, oh, woke and, MAGA Republicans. Like, that's not even the battle anymore. The
Right.
battle is elites on the right and like traditional Republicans, right? The battle is going to be the elites on the left and like people trying to bring the left back to like some type of center. It's not going to be like woke versus MAGA. It's going to be those things that are happening right now. You're going to really see that among the Republican Party, because right now it is. It's just, I mean, and I'm saying this as somebody who sits probably more center right. You're just looking at a bunch of just tech oligarchs and what they're doing, which is interesting. They're just showing the world what everyone's always done. Donald Trump's just telling everybody. President Trump's like, yeah, that's what we're going to do. Yeah, Ukraine, sure, we're going to do this, but hey, we want all your minerals. Instead of us, we couch it as democracy, but we're really there for oil. Like, I mean, he's just saying what it is. And I'm not saying that's right, but what I am trying to say is like, it's been going on. It's just now they just feel they have the ability to be so. That's the scary thing. They feel like they have the ability to be so abrasive about it and just like, yeah, I don't really care. I don't feel like we've lost the ability to have any type of decorum and culture and society to be able to say, okay, there's just certain things you just don't communicate. You lead. When you do stuff like that, it freaks people out. It impacts markets, it impacts people live. I mean, people don't realize there are a lot of people really being impacted right now by a lot of stuff that's happening. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a therapist, and like her client list has gone down because people are really worried about the economy. They're worried about their jobs getting laid off. So they've held off on therapy for themselves and for their kids because they're worried about what's going to happen. This has real life implications for people doing really good work. And so, again, I'm not saying there doesn't need to be greater efficiency and things like that. I'm a big believer in that. But I will tell you this, the way it's being handled like a tech company. You cannot do that when you're talking about a democracy and a government that's been established for over 200 years. You just can't run fast and break stuff. That doesn't exist.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question on this topic before we get into our other one? Okay, so historically, when you think of maybe views on sexuality and specifically porn, I think that's been put a lot on men and like desire and addiction to it and how that's impacted women. Something that's really interesting as the robots start to evolve is their ability to have emotionality. And so something that I have seen, this is just an observation as of right now, is how much that has started to impact women. My natural assumption in like the cultural dialogue is like, oh, men who are these addicts to sex and porn are going to be the ones falling to these sex robots, which is true. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the stories that I've actually seen come to fruition so far is women who desire deep emotional connection that they don't believe that men can give, getting emotional connection with these robots, and then it progressively turning into sex.
I think it goes there for sure. But here's what I would tell you. I think the one thing about like even like the rise of like OnlyFans, it's people going on there and it's like, men, as much as people talk about, well, men they don't want emotional connection, whatever, it's just physical. I don't fully buy that, because why there's such an industry in OnlyFans is because people literally feel like that person who I'm seeing on a screen, who may be talking to me, knows my name, may know my birthday, may know whatever, that person actually now like, oh, that person like knows me. Humans crave like love and interaction. And so I think, yes, it is going to be, because yes, women, I believe, again, just overall, yes, women are more emotional beings. They're more aware, which is a very good thing. And I think with that, you're going to see that more. I think what you're going to see is more women be more toward like what we saw in this article of like more the ChatGPT. I think men, because there is a physical thing to it, will be more toward an AI robot, but also, especially if the AI robot gets to know you, know this, whatever, it's just going to turn into that. And I just think we're heading down a road to where it's what happened to Rome. When you have no guardrails physically, it just goes here. That's the thing. That's what makes me laugh. Whether you're on the right or left, everyone thinks they're just so like, we've just evolved so much. And I'm like, we have. And then in the same breath, we're still so stupid. I'm like, just look, every empire rots itself within. And normally it's when people start to do whatever they feels right in their eyes, which that is why I really do believe the Bible, because I think it's the one thing for me when I would read it that may help me make sense of the world. It helped me make sense of evil. It helped me make sense of why the world goes the way that it does. But it also, there's hope that's there. And so I think this is just where every society goes. I think it's just going to be more of a slippery slope we're going to get on.
Yeah. And to be clear too, I definitely don't think that like sex robots in itself are going to impact one gender more than the other. As much as I think it's always interesting to see when and why and how does it impact each gender differently in our, perception of one another.
Yeah, I saw something that said like that in 10 years that the like sex robot industry will be bigger than porn, which is insane because, because right now porn makes more money than Major League Baseball, football, basketball, and hockey combined. It truly is America's pastime.
That is so sad.
No, it's really, really bad. And they're saying sex robots will be a bigger industry in 10 years.
Jeez.
Yeah. So sorry to damper the podcast today.
Okay. It tracks. I mean, no, I think that it's good because I think it's a good conversation. Because I think you mentioned this, but kind of flew by it. Like, it's a natural progression of where we've been at. Like, I read the article and my first, jump reaction to it is like, this is insane. When I sit with it, I'm like, it's actually not. Like, it tracks with, the loneliness that we've begun to experience, the lack of human connection. Even think of 2020 with COVID. Like, how much quicker are we going to have access to these things because of the increase of loneliness that was created in 2020 with COVID? So, like, I definitely think it's a natural progression of what we've been experiencing in terms of loneliness.
Yeah, and I also think it's interesting when you look at how people are, like, responding in our country. You have, like, some people who want to throw, oh man, the future, everything, go, don't hold us back, all the freedom. And then you literally have some people saying, like, let's go back. You know what I mean? Like, this whole thing, like, let's make America great again. And this isn't a shot at President Trump or anything like that, but it's like, let's make America great again. Because here's what happens. At the basement of both of them is people just want control. A lot of people want to go back because they knew that world. And they would say, oh, the world was just better. Like, I'm like, was it? Mm-hmm. Like in 1965, like in this country, was it better? I mean, people had money. They were building certain things, but, there were an entire group of people who built this country who still didn't have the right to vote. They were still getting lynched. Yeah, it wasn't great. It was not great for everyone. And I know what people say, well, yeah, we're going to leave that there. But what doesn't help it is that when now all of a sudden, and I get that's always, it went too far. The far left took it too far when it came to DEI and stuff like that. But now what's happened is they gave people a reason to roll back this stuff. And so, I mean, stuff that for years people have been building that I thought was, some of it was healthy. It went to crazy town because, again, that's why as a black man, it's always frustrating to me is when people couch stuff just with all minorities. Like, it's not. No, sometimes there's an issue that's dealing directly with women. And there's no need to, because I'm a minority and there may be women who are minority, for me to pull myself and put other people within this category. No, this is a women's issue. Let's deal with it. Or if it's a black people issue, let's say that. This is a black person's issue. Let's not pull in, let's not pulling Latinos into this. Let's not putting Asian Americans into this. This is a black people issue, vice versa. And I think that's what happened. And now people are just all over the map. And it is, and I think the next, and again, it's not just because President Trump's in office. I think it's this. Where we're going to get here, it doesn't matter if it was a Democrat in office, Republican, it is going to be crazy for the next, it is going to be for the next 4 years. It's just going to feel like you're going to wake up every day and be like, really? Like today, man, ChatGPT said, wow. Then you're going to be, oh, we're doing that. Oh, we're doing this. I thought we didn't like Russia. Now we're in bed with Russia. Oh, all this stuff is it's about to be insane. But I do think it comes back to what we've been talking about. You have to be able to manage yourself emotionally. And I think it's an incredible opportunity for leaders, because I think leaders who can lead in non-anxious ways right now will have such leverage, because everybody's going to be so driven by their emotionality in this moment in a negative way.
Yeah. And I think, this topic ties into why we do this podcast and why we do what we do. A lot of writing New Rules has so much to do with authenticity. And some of that is because we believe that authenticity is what curates true, genuine human connection and a sense of purpose within life.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So today, hard left.
Hard left.
Hard left.
I'm going to swerve and hit that corner. Whoa.
Okay.
Lauren, you got to put that song in
there. You keep that part in. That was funny.
Lauren, you got to drop that.
The vocals were good too.
Yeah, shout out my little ball. Yeah, all right. I'm sorry, not mellow, jello ball. There we go. All right, there we go.
Okay. Okay, so today we are actually going to talk about how to find purpose, something that we discuss all the time. If you've been a part of the New Rules community in one form or fashion, you have heard the idea that we believe that your greatest sense of purpose is almost always found in your greatest place of pain. So we're going to talk a little bit about that process and why we believe that. One of the reasons why I think even, the topic of sex robots ties into this conversation is something that we believe to be true is that without vision, we begin to perish. And something that we are seeing across the board is men and women who lack vision for their life. And not only do they lack a vision for their life, when they feel like they have it, it's usually they're judging themselves according to a scoreboard that is actually not theirs, and still creates a sense of perish within their souls. So with that being said, can you just share a little bit about how this idea came to you? Did you hear it somewhere else? Was it curated kind of within you? When did this discussion happen?
Yeah, honestly, this is one of those, again, people have talked about it at some point, but for me, it wasn't hearing something. It was curated from within. For me, that more of the revelation of that. And if I could kind of go back and try to think about the genesis of it, it was multiple years. I would say maybe 7-10 years ago, something like that, I started thinking about this. And in the book Mask Off that I wrote, I actually wrote about this. But it was really my first thing I started going back to. I started thinking about my father when my father was let go at the University of Akron. So my dad, first black head basketball coach, and going into, I think it was year 5. It was year 5. He ended up getting let go as the head coach. I'll never forget him telling me that. I never pick up a school. It was a pretty tough moment because, my father in that moment, man, he felt like he let down, not only us, he let down, as a black man being the first, let down the entire black community, black coaches, all this stuff. So that weight was, as a 16-year-old kid, that's hard to see your dad struggling like that. But what I realized in that moment was that in that moment is a very painful memory for me, but it marked me in that moment because I realized how much, one of the reasons why my dad was let go was, he had to win more games, but my dad was kind of like someone who did, no one really helped him through with his emotionality. And he was somebody who, he's like me. It's to break the wall. It's to push the wall. It's to go through something. And what I realized in that moment that got embedded in me is that I didn't want to work for somebody. I didn't want to work for somebody because I knew that, I didn't want anyone being in control of, what I felt like I was supposed to do. And in that midst of that painful moment, I began to discover, oh, man, this idea of entrepreneurship, this idea of kind of creating and starting. Now, I say that I have high levels of accountability. I have a board on some of the things that I do. I've got great friends who are in my life who have access to a lot of things in my life. So I'm not saying this is not with accountability, but what I am trying to say is the ability to go create and move and do with the freedom. And I knew I would need that. And so in that place of pain, that's a painful moment, I found an incredible sense of purpose. And I can go on and on about how I found, there's other parts of pain in my story that has led to this whole curating of what this means about authenticity.
Okay, so I think there are a few points that you wrote about within your book, Mask Off, Unlocking Authenticity in an Age of Imposters.
Shout out. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put it in the show notes. Go to Amazon. You can grab it.
And so a place where I do want to start off at is bars, the great assassins of purpose, corrupted emotion and corrupted desire. So I do want to talk a little bit about how corrupted emotion and desire impacts our view of purpose. How you described corrupted emotion. So emotion will convince you feelings are true enough to guide you, that destructive behaviors bring life, and that purpose, driven by the need to avoid discomfort, will bring you freedom. Can you talk a little bit about how, when you've unearthed different components of your story over time, where have you seen corrupted emotion, and what did it look like for you to unearth it and turn it into a greater sense of authenticity?
Yeah, I'll talk about even right now, because it's something I tell people, you defeat assassins at different things, but assassins will come, corrupted emotions, corrupted desire. Those assassins, you will kill them, but it's kind of like they spawn and come back to life, and they're going to try to do it. So you just learn how to fight them at every turn. And I think at every juncture of growth, they're coming back. And even right now, the idea of corrupted like emotions and desires, right? For me, it's this idea of, like I've talked about before, of feeling like I was overlooked. So I can find myself wanting to be in situations. I can find myself, jumping in, accepting a deal that maybe wasn't the right deal to take, or accepting a deal because financially I took less than what I should have taken, or it's made me distracted on stuff I should be focusing on because I feel like this group actually is this group. I really want this group to accept me. And a lot of times what happens with assassins, do you think about an assassin? Most of the times when people, like, they're unseen, their whole thing is to be quiet. Their whole thing is to kill and not to be recognized. And I think a lot of times what happens with people is the assassins that kill them of their emotional desires are not the big things they see. It's very, very subtle. But then you're wondering why. Why do I always do this? Why do I always get to this place in my job and I get fired? Why do I always get into a relationship to this point and then that relationship breaks up? Why do I always get a business to this point and then it never gets past this point? A lot of times it's just corrupted desires and emotions that are underneath that we don't ever recognize, and they're just silent assassins. And so for me, I've seen that in my life recently. I've seen that a lot in the past, where that idea of wanting to be seen. So that means, give me a place of, so my desires were a place of significance, a place of a title or whatever, prestige. What I would do is chase after things that many times were not from the right place. It wasn't about making impact. It wasn't about, adding to human flourishing. It wasn't about the betterment of others. It was about the betterment of me and what could look like for me. And whenever that happened, it just never worked out. And even if it did work out, I always felt so empty when it did. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. And so those are just things over the years that I'm constantly aware of, the type of assassins that come my way.
In the beginning of that response, you talked a little bit about how assassins respawn. Can you share a little bit more about how you have fallen in love with the journey? Because a lot of the times when we think of purpose, especially the younger you are, you have this idea of like, one day I will know my purpose and I will be satisfied and life will be easy. When really so much of purpose is the journey of becoming. It's about unearthing things and continue to practice self-awareness, authenticity, being a non-anxious presence, and resilience through every phase of your life. Can you talk a little bit about how that process has played out for you and what you do in the moments when you feel like, I should already know how to deal with this? Why am I dealing with this again?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so probably the best picture I can kind of paint of it, and again, this is, I'm going to use the Bible in this moment because it actually is the way I kind of figured it out. So I'm going to be very authentic and true of how I figured it out. Is there's a story, and it's about, the Israelites, and it's, some people maybe you've ever seen the Prince of Egypt and the whole thing of, going across the Red Sea against the Egyptians, whatever. But then the whole point was that they were going to go to this thing called the Promised Land. Well, in this Promised Land, something God had promised, there were 31 kings. And one thing that happens, that in that land they were going to, they had to defeat 31 kings. And what I've realized is that is life. Is that when you go through life and you're moving in life, you have these 31 kings, these adversaries, these things. And again, I'm not saying the exact number 31, but there's adversaries in your life in this promised land that you're going to have to go against. And see, the thing about it is what you said. When I was younger, it's like, oh no, once I know this, I'm going to be good, satisfied, whatever. But then when you face resistance, or you're like, why don't I know? Why am I still struggling with this? Why is this coming up? It's because it's just the journey of actually becoming more and more human, becoming more and more better as you go through these things. And so what I had to learn is, once I realized the rest of life will be peeling back the onion, right? It'll just be, okay. So instead of me waiting to when I get here, I'm fully going to have, no, I'm better. And I already know this. When I get to 50, there's going to probably be something I thought. I was like, I thought I was done with this. Nope, peel the layer back. Because I think as you do that, you learn more and more. And also for me personally, my personal belief is that I think it's a way, if you're a follower of Jesus, it's a way that God calls you to walk with him. Because, if he just gave you everything, then you're like, all right, our natural human condition will be like, all right, peace, we'll talk to you later, right? See you in heaven. But like, he wants to like walk with you consistently. So anyway, all that being said, I just think once you can understand the journey, it's kind of like, you know, it is when you were doing like 2-a-days or you were going through that and you just knew it was going to be awful. And there was something about knowing it's going to be awful. They're like, okay, it's like if you went in, it's like, oh, no, it's going to be a light day. You're like, and then it was terrible. It'd be miserable versus like, no, this next 2 weeks is horrible. Mm-hmm. And they just got your mindset right. So when you know it's a journey, it just helps you be able to move through life and see things a lot clearer.
Yeah. And I think something that you don't always believe that you do really well, that I'm going to give you your flowers on. Right. In part, you don't believe this because your mind lives so frequently in, you know, what everything that you could continue to do better. But something that I've been so appreciative of is how every time you experience something that is more stressful than the last thing that you've experienced, you do have the kind of resilience that requires you to view the stress as another opportunity to be refined at a greater measure and to grow your level of authenticity. Because it's like, there does come a point where it's like, well, I can carry the weight of this without it crushing me. Yeah. And so am I going to ride this wave for the rest of my life because I'm in my mid-40s, I could be comfortable, I could just ride it out. But I do think that you oftentimes do really see greater measures of pressure so that you can continue to elevate in how you show up with purpose, even when you feel hopeless or even when you feel pain.
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, I just realized that I have a responsibility in my life to try to maximize whatever it is that I've been given. And so I realized to do that, you just have to go through stuff. You have to learn, you have to go through resistance, you have to push through stuff, you have to move, you got to recognize, and then you're going to have all the emotions, right? Like I've been going through like somewhat like, you know, there's the levels of emotional things right now that I'm working through. And it's like, yeah, it's really tough, especially over the last couple of weeks. Well, in that though, I've had to say, okay, that doesn't mean I've been like, oh my gosh, like, hey, it's like I'm this perfect person. No, there's been some dark times. But that's part of when you understand you're riding the wave, you have to ride the wave. The key, though, is understanding when you're in certain times, what are the practices to keep you out of like the depth, to keep you out of like the real ditch, right? And so for me, I know when I get those times, I have friends. I have to force myself. I have such a habit now when I go through those times that I'm texting my friends and telling them, I don't want to do that. I do it out of practice to make sure I'm staying engaged, because what I can easily do is just want to isolate myself. So I've literally built the practice of when I'm going through stuff to just let people know this is what's going on, because it's a practice for me to stay connected with people. Because a lot of times when you go through stuff and you're facing resistance, you just want to isolate yourself. And it's something about people reminding you who you are, what you do, you know, people who can encourage you, people can challenge you if you got the wrong view, stuff like that. And so I just think through it, it's just learning those practices. But I've also realized, like, man, I want to maximize the things in life.
Yeah. Would you mind diving a little bit deeper into how it is that you've been feeling? Because I have a few questions about it. So you find yourself, or I'll say even like we find ourselves, we have these moments where we just experience like these waves, deep waves. You have most of your life of just like sadness, hopelessness. They come and they go. And that's what you mean by riding the wave. When they come, pay attention to it. And whenever it's not there, like run as fast as you can. You mentioned that in those time periods, a huge marker for you is practicing relational connection with your closest friends. Yep. And that sounds really simple, but especially to the younger listeners on this podcast, like that idea can come off as so anxiety inducing and so abstract. It's like, well, how do I have this conversation when that's not currently the culture of my life and that's not currently the culture of my friend group? Whereas like you've had or been practicing these kinds of conversations and intimacy for a really long time, that's just understood. Like I know Adrian, when he is like this, we're going to be having, you know, these kinds of conversations. And so how would you say to the person who maybe they're feeling that way and they don't have the culture in their life of having those conversations, like what does it practically look like to talk to somebody about it?
Yeah, it's really good. I think the first thing is just being able to like sit down with someone. And again, it's just always like that first step, but it may seem weird. It may seem whatever, but it's one of those people who say like you're close to, and just being able to say like, hey, listen, I'm going through these things. I mean, I really need someone that I can just let know what's happening, what's going on. Again, And the expectation is, just saying, do you mind being someone who's willing just to check up on me? I'm not expecting you to do, all these, send me like freaking like a self-care package every day or anything like that. It's just like somebody who just like, man, I'm calling for you, maybe I'm praying for you, whatever it may be. And I think you're willing to have that conversation. I think it's important. I think the second thing is the willingness to just share and talk about it. Like I have a friend of mine who has become a really good friend, and it's funny. It wasn't like I sat with him one day and we were talking about like, oh man, like this. We built a relationship through basketball. And so he was here at Florida State, and we just have a great relationship. Matter of fact, I'm gonna see him tonight. Like we just built a relationship, a friendship. I'll call, I would check on him, whatever. But then, man, one day he just asked, "Hey, man, what's been going on?" And again, we didn't have like the deep relationship like I do with like some of my closest friends. But in that moment, was like unashamed. When people ask me that question, I don't want to say like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." Like I was like, nah, man, hey, I've been really struggling. I've struggled through my life with mental health. Well, what that led to, he opened up to me, which I didn't know, where he went through this huge bout of depression. And so now what's happened is he's become a person I go talk to because he's been through it. He really understands it. So when I call him or tell him, hey, man, I just want to let you know I'm not in a great place right now. He doesn't tell me, some people who've never been through it, they're like, oh, you're going to be okay. It's great. He's like, yeah, I know none of that I'm going to tell you is going to be whatever, but I just want to let you know, love you. We'll talk to you. If you need me, I'm right here, but you're needed, and then that's it. And it's just somebody who gets it. But that came from me just willing to be open and vulnerable. I think that's the first step. You got to be willing to be open and vulnerable. And most people don't want to do that. Or what they're trying to do as well, I think a little bit in the younger generation, people overshare. I want to tell everybody this because what you're wanting to do is for it to be everybody's problem. You can't do that. You have to know who are those people and be willing to go deep. Because a lot of things I hear people share, they're not getting to the real basement. They're sharing, oh yeah, I'm struggling. Okay, but why? Oh, this happened. Okay, well, what happened with that? I mean, you got to be willing to go deep in that part of the conversation. So I think it's just taking that first step.
So the next thing that I want to talk about, which you also mentioned inside of the book, was get to the basement. Just as a really practical tool to have a greater understanding of the pain that you've experienced. And so I'm going to read an excerpt. It says, the true weapon is the ability to ask yourself why, because once motive is free, it becomes our ally. The question of why disarms and dissects corrupted emotion in order to address the fear, anger, or shame that is corrupting your motive. And I think this is a really important part because most of the time when we think of purpose, we think about our desire for it to relieve our discomfort, when really something we say all the time is that it has everything to do with you and nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with you because it's birthed from your pain. It's your action, something that you're supposed to move forward with in your life, but it has nothing to do with you because it's really about the service of other people and the service to humanity. And so when our corrupted emotions and desire corrupt our motive, that's what turns it so inward, and it really being about relieving ourselves of our own fear and our own shame. So could you share a little bit more about how you've practiced getting to the basement?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think one is, I want to say this and then I'll get to that question, is I think what you have to understand about your purpose, what I've realized now in life, walking in your purpose is literally walking into pain. You discover it in pain and it delivers you into pain. Because what it does, when you're really walking your purpose, you've had all these other things, these other assassins pushing against you to not find it. You have your past, you have emotions, you have desires, you have shame, you have guilt, you have what words people have spoken. And now when you start to discover that, you still built a life that's been to stay away from those words. You know how it is, like when you don't want to think about a past memory, or when that coach said this, or that person said this, and you try to block, you've built your life and say, you're never going to be this. And so you've like, nope, I'm always going to be this. And you've done all these things. Now you find purpose. You now are walking toward in life. Those things are still going to come against you. And so I think people have to be ready for that. I think because we live in this world that we've been sold that authenticity and purpose means no pain. Right? Like when I watch, and again, last night I'm watching like Luka Doncic play basketball. I'm watching him play basketball. Like as I'm watching him play basketball, so I'm like, and LeBron James, like they're more than just a basketball player, but that's a part of who they are. Right? As I'm watching them, I'm like, man, to get to those levels, the level of pain they have to go through in order to be successful at what they do, right? The order of what they like, it's always pain to have success. It's always pain to walk stuff, but for some reason, but what it does, what purpose allows you to do, it allows you to endure it. It makes you go through it because you know it's something great. There's a love that's there. There's something greater than yourself that's there. So that's that. But getting to your question about how do you actually get there, like actually into the basement, is what we've talked about before. It's really why you have to get there. It's really the power of like why. You have to really take time. And I'm going to I know we've talked about the power of why on some other podcasts, but what I want to say is like one of the big things, you have to actually have to create space for yourself to be able to sit and actually do the autopsy of it. Most people today don't want to sit long enough to actually think about it. To think about, man, why do I actually like this thing? I used to always wonder, like, I used to have all these, it's hilarious. I used to always have all these like just different like kind of like dreams, or like I could like imagine things, right? Where scenarios, or like if I'm going to get drafted one day, or man, I imagine meeting this person, what would that be like? And I play the whole thing out. And sometimes I just daydream for like 30, 40 minutes, right? And I used to always be like, man, what's wrong with me? And then one day I stopped, like, why do I like to do that? Like, why do I genuinely like to do that? And some of it was, in the past, it was relief because of some of the pressure I was feeling internally and even in my home. The other part, it was like, I liked it because, man, I feel like, dude, I can actually create something. And so once I started embracing that, I've been able to, like, a lot of things I've thought through, I've been able to actually create it in real life. And so it was me being curious about it. I never would have thought of myself as some type of creative when I was a kid. I never would have thought that. But I started to realize, like, oh, it was there, but I had to be curious about it. So anyway, all that being said, I think you got to sit silent. I think you got to be willing to say, okay, how did I feel about this? Good or bad? I just don't think anybody stops a lot to think about even what do you enjoy? Why do you enjoy? I mean, the simple things. You could be watching a movie and all of a sudden, and we talk about this all the time, like we're watching like 1923, right? So it's like, we're watching 1923. I'm like, why do I like, I literally asked myself, like, why do I like 1923?
Why do you like 1923?
I like 1923 because what it's about people struggling to build something, but knowing what it got built. They saw something. And now, I'm actually going to Montana in like a month and a half or something like that. I know. And so like, so I'm like, so in doing that, I'm like, but these people saw something in a frontier that they thought one day could be something like whatever. I love the ability to people to see something, but then to struggle to make that become a reality and go after it. That's why I like it. But it made me, because that's a lot of how I am. Well, I still think about that stuff. And then I see a character. Well, why do I like that character? Or why do I like this person? Or why do I like this? And I think I want to encourage you. The way you get to the basement is being curious, but being compassionate to yourself. Be curious of why you want to, and then just be compassionate. Because some of it may be like, because we'll think that that's a dumb idea. And you're like, why? It may not be a dumb idea. I've learned a lot of stuff that I thought was a dumb idea. Actually help unearth those things in me.
Yeah, there's something that an author that we love, Parker J. Palmer, has talked about before. I think it's an Emily Dickinson quote maybe, where it talks about tell the truth, but tell it in a slant as to not scare the soul away.
Yes, and hidden wholeness, yeah.
Yes, so it's one of those things where a lot of times when we want something from like to be developed inside so bad, we're like looking at ourselves like, tell me my purpose, tell me why. And the more intense and the more afraid and the more shameful you are when speaking to yourself, the more you limit the curiosity and compassion that it actually takes to actually unearth what's going on inside.
Yeah, and that idea, that statement was so helpful for me, of like telling it in a slant, because it's like, because we lived in a world today where everyone's like, oh, man, just keep it real. Tell me whatever. The people, if you start off like that with me, man, I just want you to keep it a buck with me, keep it real. I already know you cannot know. If you're starting there, that means you absolutely cannot. You're going to be the one. As soon as I tell you the truth, you're going to like lose your mind. But when telling it at a slant, it's not like lying to somebody. It's, it's the idea of telling them something at the pace that they can understand, because again, you're trying to get to a basement. And you know what? If you're trying to like dig through something, like you got to just keep, chopping away at something. You're just not going to go directly there.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's about, did they hear it? Were they able to understand what it is that I'm telling them, not about me just saying it.
Yeah, because then you think about yourself when we talk about that, and you made a great point. It's like when you're not doing that for yourself, just think about some of the moments you've had in your life to where like it's just you look back on it and it's like it could be cringy, it could be shameful, it could just be whatever. Like as soon as you think about it, you're like, oh no, and then you just go through, God, I'm such an idiot. Why would I ever do that? Versus being like, okay, like all right, yes, I was an idiot, but here's the thing though. But okay, but what was there anything good there? Even though that would end up being bad, was there anything good? Like, I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, we were so just deviant when it came to like, especially like from like 6th grade to 8th grade. And it was like, we just vandalized stuff for no reason, right? It was like me, yeah, it's like me and me and my wealthy white friends. Like we just like.
I'm not gonna lie, I stole from a few gas stations.
I'll do. We were
that corner store. I'd walk up. Give me some candy.
I mean, we were out there. Let me tell you this, boy. I mean, we couldn't do it today because eggs, because with inflation, you can't be throwing eggs anymore. But man, we would be out there, and I'm talking about we're egging people's houses. I mean, we got to take toilet paper. I mean, we literally, again, we're past the point of like I can't get in trouble for this, but man, my old high school, we literally climbed to the top of my high school and ripped out all of the wiring to all the lights, dude.
Wait, that's such an expensive.
No, it's a felony. It's a felony. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if we would have like back then, we would have got caught. It's like, I mean, it's a felony.
Yeah, I respect that. In high school, we put the golf carts on top of the high school.
Oh, dude, here was another one. We went to our rival high school. They were redoing their roof, tarring their roof. We literally took the tar rollers. We climbed up on the roof, took the tar rollers, and wrote "F-U" like across the front of their school before the first day of school. So people showed up the first day of school. I mean, it was on the news. It was the whole thing. So here's the thing, though. But like when I think about that, like I look back on those moments, like oh, like the shame or even the fear of like, dude, I could have like my basketball career could have been over. All those things. But I literally wonder, it's like, why? Like, why did I enjoy that? Did I like destroying property? No, I had no idea that. It was honestly, it was doing something with people. And these guys are my friends. It was a thrill of what we were doing. It was a thrill of it, and they were my friends. And it was the stories we could tell. That was probably the main thing. Because we would always say, like, yo, the stories after this is going to be epic, right? So we could tell those stories forever. And so for me, what I learned was like, man, how much relationship in doing something that's like meaningful and something that's exciting and worthwhile with people, it means a whole lot to me. I was willing to risk like getting in trouble to do that for the sake of that. And so if I always look back and like, yeah, I was such a dumb move, don't ever do this, da-da-da, versus saying, okay, but why? Like, why did I do it? And it really helped me open up to understand that. Well, hey guys, I hope today was actually helpful for you. And what we want to do as we talk through these ideas, you're going to hear us talk a ton about purpose because purpose does matter to us. But what we want to try to, and I want to try to encourage you with today is simply this, is to try to create space for yourself. Maybe think back throughout your day, think about a moment, a good moment, a bad moment, and just try to get to the basement. Ask yourself why. Why did you feel the way you feel, good or bad? And try to ask yourself why at least 3 times. Try to be curious, compassionate, tell yourself again the truth at a slant. Try to understand what's going on so that when you do, you can start to begin to discover these are breadcrumbs that actually can be things that start to lead you to what you've been actually hardwired to do. Until next time, keep writing new rules.